The rule of thirds is one of the most useful rules that you should learn first when you are looking to get into photography or cinematography. It's very useful in improving the composition of any imagery you create, but it's also very simple to use, which is why it's an excellent place to start. It's also very much worth discussing this when you're facing any analytical tasks in media studies. So when you're analysing any given media text, you should consider whether the rules of thirds have been followed or broken. The rule of thirds is very simple. It's essentially in any given space you divide it into 3 equal components across each of the axes. So here you can see I've divided a square using 2 horizontal lines and 2 vertical lines to create a grid. The way in which you can use that is, for example, here's a photo of a standard portrait. It stands out quite well because it has adhered to the rule of thirds. If I add this grid line, when I've divided it into equal thirds, you can see the model is sat perfectly across the vertical line on the left. This divides the image up and makes it more pleasing to the eye. Her eye line is also close to the horizontal third line. To improve this image, you might want to have panned the image down to make sure her eyes are along that third line, because essentially what you want to do is make sure any objects of interest are either along that line or in close proximity to it to create a more pleasing image for your viewer. This doesn't just have to apply to portraiture. So for example, I have a very simple image of the London skyline. As we can see, once we add the rule of third grid line, the actual horizon is right across the bottom horizontal grid line. This again will make this photo more pleasing to the eye than it would be if you had not adhered to this. This will also be found in most forms of imagery for promotion. So for example, if we look at this poster here for the movie Taken Free, once we apply the grid line, you'll see that Liam Neeson has been placed quite firmly. His eye is very close to the rule of third grid line on the vertical right. And we can also see that it ends here and the title are actually very firmly placed within each of the thirds of the top and bottom of the page. This essentially divides the poster up and allows the viewer to take it in more easily, and the placing of Liam Neeson on this point here will make the poster far more eye-catching and pleasing to the viewer. This doesn't just have to apply to still images as well. As I previously mentioned, we can apply it to videography, cinematography, sorry. So if we look at this image here from a still I've taken from a Ben Stiller movie, you can see that when they're filming this scene, they very firmly placed Ben Stiller on the left-hand vertical grid line. This again just creates a far more pleasing image for the viewer and will make the product far more eye-catching to them. So there you have it. For the use of 3 very simple sections of your video or photograph, you can improve your composition of your product. The essential rule is to remember is place any objects you can along either the vertical or horizontal grid lines, and wherever you can, for example if it's an eye of a model or a particular object that creates a point in your image, you really ideally want to place it as close to the crossover points as you can.